In the darkest corner of the galaxy, where three alien empires clash in endless war, there exists a truth that would shatter everything they believe about the universe. Humans don't just fight for territory, resources, or glory. They fight for a wounded creature they've never seen before, simply because it needs help. When the Kithra military discovered that their most elite war beast had been rescued by the galaxy's newest species, they prepared for the humans to demand ransom, territorial concessions, or advanced technology. Instead, the humans asked for one thing: veterinary supplies and a promise that no more war animals would be left to die. This is the story of how a dying alien war dog named Vorthak became the bridge between species, and how humanity's greatest weapon isn't their technology or tactics. It's their refusal to let any living being suffer alone. The plasma rain had stopped 3 hours ago, but the battlefield of Kepler 442c still smoldered with the aftermath of destruction. Sergeant Maria Santos pulled her environmental suit tighter as she picked her way through the twisted metal and crystallized sand that had once been a thriving Kithra military outpost. Her squad moved in practiced formation behind her, their boots crunching on debris that sparkled like deadly diamonds in the alien sun's harsh light. "Movement 2 clicks northeast," whispered Private Chun through the comm system, his rifle already trained on a pile of rubble near what remained of a communications tower. "Something big." Maria raised her hand, stopping the squad's advance. The Kithra were known for their brutal efficiency in warfare, but they were also known for leaving traps. After 6 months of fighting on this godforsaken planet, she'd learned to respect their tactical cunning even as she despised their cruelty. The war had been raging for 8 standard months now, ever since humanity had accidentally stumbled into this three-way conflict between the Kithra Empire, the Zolonian Collective, and the Threxian Republic. "Could be survivors," muttered Corporal Williams, his scarred face visible through his helmet's visor. "We should call in and move on. Mission parameters say reconnaissance only." Maria nodded, but something made her hesitate. The movement wasn't mechanical or deliberate like she'd expect from a wounded Kithra soldier setting an ambush. It was weak, desperate, almost animal-like. She'd grown up on a ranch back on Earth, and some instincts never left you. "Chun, Thompson, take flanking positions. Williams, you're with me. We investigate, but carefully." She switched to the command frequency. "Base, this is Santos. We have possible survivors at grid reference 77 Alpha. Moving to investigate." The response crackled through static. "Copy, Santos. Exercise extreme caution. Remember, we're not here to take prisoners." As they moved closer, the source of the movement became clear. Half buried under a collapsed section of the Kithra bunker was something that made Maria's breath catch in her throat. It was roughly the size of a small horse, but its body was covered in what looked like natural armor plating. 6 legs ended in claws that could probably tear through titanium, and its elongated head housed a mouth filled with teeth designed for ripping and tearing. "Holy hell," breathed Williams. "That's one of their war beasts. I've seen the intel reports. They call them Kithran hunters. Those things can track a target across 3-star systems." The creature was clearly dying. One of its rear legs was completely severed, the wound cauterized by plasma fire. Its breathing was labored, and a thick blue-black fluid that must have been its blood pooled beneath its massive form. But what struck Maria most was its eyes. Even through the alien features, she could see intelligence there, and something else that transcended species barriers: pain and confusion. "It's suffering," she said quietly. "It's a weapon," Williams countered. "Look at those claws, Sarge. Those teeth. How many of our people do you think that thing has killed?" Maria knew Williams was right from a tactical standpoint. The Kithran hunters were bred for war, genetically modified predators that could take down a powered armor suit with their bare claws. Intelligence reports suggested they were barely sentient, more like biological machines than actual animals. But standing here, looking into those eyes, Maria saw something that reminded her of her old dog Rex, who'd been hit by a transport speeder when she was 12. "Chun, what's your reading on life signs?" "Fading fast, Zaga. Whatever happened here, it's been trapped for hours. Probably since the bombardment last night." The creature's head lifted slightly, and its eyes fixed on Maria. For a moment, neither human nor alien moved. Then, to everyone's shock, the beast made a sound that was unmistakably a whimper. "Did that thing just—" Thompson started. "Yeah," Maria said. "It did." She'd made a career out of following orders, but sometimes orders conflicted with something deeper. Her grandfather had told her stories about the old wars on Earth, about soldiers who'd risked everything to save wounded animals they'd found on battlefields. At the time, she thought those stories were just sentimental nonsense. Now, she wasn't so sure. "Sarge," Williams said urgently, "we need to move. If there are Kithara survivors in the area, they'll be drawn to their war beast distress calls." "I'm not hearing any distress calls," Maria observed. "Are you?" The creature had fallen silent again, but its eyes remained fixed on her. There was something almost trusting in that gaze. It made no sense. This was a weapon designed to kill humans, and yet it seemed to be asking for help. "Base, this is Santos. We found a wounded Kitharan hunter. It appears to be trapped and dying." "Copy that. Santos, mark the position for intelligence sweep and continue with your mission." "Roger, Base." Maria switched off the comm and looked at her squad. "Thompson, what do you know about xenobiology?" "Enough to know that thing could take my head off, even wounded," the young medic replied. "But also enough to know it's in serious pain. The blue fluid is definitely blood, and from the way it's breathing, I'd say it has internal injuries too. Could you treat it?" The question hung in the air like a live grenade. Williams stared at her like she'd lost her mind, while Chun and Thompson exchanged uncertain glances. "Theoretically," Thompson said slowly, "basic trauma medicine is pretty universal. Stop the bleeding, treat for shock, stabilize vital signs. But, Sarge, this isn't some stray cat we're talking about. This is an enemy war beast that's dying alone and in pain." Maria finished. "Look, I know how it sounds, but we've got 30 minutes before we need to check in again, and Intel would probably love to examine a live specimen." It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. The real truth was something Maria couldn't quite articulate, even to herself. All she knew was that she couldn't walk away from a suffering creature, no matter what species it was or what side of the war it had been on. "Fine," Williams said with obvious reluctance. "But if that thing tries to bite anyone's head off, I'm putting it down." Thompson approached cautiously, his medical scanner in one hand and a plasma pistol in the other. The creature watched him, but made no aggressive moves. If anything, it seemed to relax slightly as the medic began taking readings. "Fascinating," Thompson murmured. "Its physiology is more complex than the intel report suggested. Multiple hearts, redundant respiratory systems, enhanced nervous system integration. But the basic principles are similar enough to Earth mammals that I think I can help." "Do it," Maria ordered. What followed was perhaps the strangest field medical procedure in human military history. Thompson worked with careful precision, using emergency medical supplies to treat an alien war beast while his squad mates kept watch for enemy forces. The creature remained remarkably still throughout the process, occasionally making small sounds that could almost have been grateful whimpers. "I've stopped the bleeding and administered general painkillers," Thompson reported, "but it needs proper surgical attention to survive. That leg needs to be properly amputated, and the internal injuries are beyond my capabilities." "How long does it have?" "Without treatment? Maybe 6 hours. With proper care, it can make a full recovery." "Well, mostly full. It'll never be quite the same with only 5 legs." Maria made a decision that would change the course of her career, her life, and ultimately, the war itself. "Chun, contact base. Tell them we've secured a valuable intelligence asset and are requesting immediate medevac." "Sarge," Williams said quietly, "you know they're going to ask questions. Let them ask. By the time we get back, this animal will be safe, and maybe we'll have learned something important about our enemies." As they waited for the evacuation transport, Maria sat near the wounded creature. Up close, she could see details that the intelligence reports had missed. Its armor plating wasn't just functional. It had decorative patterns etched into it. Its claws, while deadly, were also carefully maintained. This wasn't just a biological weapon. It was someone's companion, someone's partner in warfare. "What's your name, big guy?" she whispered, knowing the creature couldn't understand, but feeling the need to talk anyway. "Do your people give you names, or are you just a number to them?" The creature's eyes tracked her movement, and, for just a moment, Maria could have sworn she saw recognition there. Not of her specifically, but of the tone of kindness in her voice. It was a look she'd seen in countless animals back home, a recognition of safety and care. The medevac arrived 23 minutes later, its pilot clearly confused about why he was being asked to transport a Kithran war beast to the human medical facility. But orders were orders, and within an hour, the creature was in the hands of the xenobiological medical team at Forward Operating Base Darwin. As Maria watched the transport disappear into the alien sky, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just changed something fundamental about this war. She had no way of knowing how right she was, or how far the consequences of her compassion would reach. Back at base, the debriefing was exactly as uncomfortable as Williams had predicted. Colonel Harrison was not pleased with the use of military resources to save an enemy war beast, even one that might have intelligence value. But the xenobiology team was ecstatic, and Dr. Sarah Chun, the chief xenobiologist, assured command that the creature could provide invaluable insights into Kithran military capabilities. "Just make sure it stays sedated," the colonel ordered. "The last thing we need is that thing breaking loose and killing half the medical staff." But as Maria walked back to her quarters that night, she passed by the medical bay and saw something that made her stop. Through the reinforced window, she could see the creature lying on a specially constructed examination table. It was conscious, its eyes clear and alert, and Dr. Chun was sitting beside it, speaking in soft, soothing tones while checking its bandages. The war beast was listening. Maria realized then that her assumption had been wrong. This creature wasn't barely sentient. It was fully intelligent, possibly as much as any human. And if that was true, then everything they thought they knew about the Kithra military, their society, and the nature of this war might be wrong too. She had saved a life today, but she might have done much more than that. She might have saved the first chance for peace this galaxy had seen in decades. Dr. Sarah Chun had been studying xenobiology for 15 years, but she had never encountered anything quite like the creature that had been brought to her medical bay. The initial scans had revealed anatomical complexities that challenged everything humanity thought they knew about Kithran war beasts, but it was the behavioral observations that truly fascinated her. Patient shows remarkable cognitive responses, she dictated to her recording device as she checked the creature's vital signs for the third time that morning. Pulse steady at what appears to be normal levels for its species. Breathing regular. Most significantly, it demonstrates clear understanding of medical procedures and appears to be cooperating with treatment. The creature, which the soldiers had started calling Tank due to its armored appearance, watched her every movement with intelligent eyes. When she approached with medical instruments, it would shift its position to give her better access to wounds or injection sites. When she spoke to it in soothing tones, its stress indicators decreased measurably. This level of intelligence suggests these beings are not the mindless weapons we believe them to be, she continued her notes. If this is representative of the species, we may need to reconsider our entire understanding of Kithran society and military structure. A knock at the medical bay door interrupted her observations. Sergeant Santos stood outside, still in her dusty field gear. "Doctor," requesting permission to visit the patient. Sarah hesitated. Military personnel weren't typically allowed in the xenobiology section, but Santos had been the one to find and save the creature. "Come in, Sergeant, but move slowly and keep your voice down. We're still learning about its stress responses." Santos entered the sterile medical environment and approached the examination table where Tank lay. The moment the creature saw her, its entire demeanor changed. What had been calm alertness became something approaching excitement, its head lifting and its remaining functional legs shifting as if it wanted to stand. "Well, that's interesting," Sarah murmured. "It clearly recognizes you." "Hey there, big guy," Santos said softly, approaching with the same careful manner she'd used on the battlefield. "Feeling better?" Tank made a low rumbling sound that wasn't quite a growl, more like a purr if a creature the size of a small elephant could purr. It tried to lift its head towards Santos, and she instinctively reached out to touch what she assumed was a safe spot on its armored forehead. The moment her hand made contact, both human and alien froze. Sarah's instruments immediately began registering unusual neural activity from Tank, while Santos felt something she would later describe as a warm, tingling sensation in her mind. "Sergeant," Sarah said urgently, "don't move. I'm reading some kind of neural interface activity." But Santos wasn't listening to the doctor. She was listening to something else entirely, something that wasn't quite words, but somehow carried meaning directly into her consciousness. Gratitude, confusion, pain lessening, Questions about pack status. Recognition of kindness sent. Asterisk, Dr. Santos whispered. I think it's trying to communicate with me. That's impossible. Kithran war beasts don't have telepathic abilities according to our intelligence. Not telepathy. Enhanced empathic resonance. Bred trait for battlefield coordination. Humans smell different, taste different in mind space. Curious about soft species kindness. Astra Santos found herself understanding concepts that had no direct human equivalent. Pack status seemed to relate to military hierarchy, but with emotional and loyalty components that went far beyond human military structure. Kindness scent was apparently a pheromone signature that indicated non-aggressive intent, something Tank could detect, but had never encountered from a different species before. It's not telepathy, Santos said, trying to process the strange information flowing into her mind. It's more like enhanced empathy. They use it to coordinate in battle, but it also lets them sense emotions and intentions. Fascinating, Sarah breathed, her scientific excitement overriding her caution. Can you ask the questions? Santos focused on Tank, tried to project curiosity rather than specific words. The response came as a flood of images and sensations. She saw flashes of Tank's life. Hatching in a military breeding facility, training with Kithran handlers, the strange mix of affection and fear that characterized its relationship with its masters. But she also saw recent memories, the battle that had wounded it being left behind as the Kithran forces retreated, the growing certainty that it would die alone. They left it, Santos said, her voice filled with anger. It was wounded and slowing them down, so they just left it to die. Standard protocol. Damaged assets abandoned. Expected, but confusing when soft species showed different behavior. Kindness to wounded enemy, not in known behavioral patterns. Asterisk, it doesn't understand why we helped it, Santos continued, serving as an interpreter for the alien's thoughts. Apparently, showing mercy to enemies isn't something it's familiar with. Sarah was frantically taking notes, realizing she was witnessing the first real communication between humans and Kithran forces. Ask it about its people, their society, their military structure, anything it can tell us. But as Santos tried to focus on more complex questions, Tank's responses became increasingly agitated. The creature's stress indicators spiked, and it began making distress sounds. Loyalty bonds conflicted, grateful to soft species, but trained imperative prevents information sharing. Pack loyalty wars with gratitude debt, confusion and distress. Asterisk, it wants to help us, Santos realized, but it's been conditioned not to betray its people. It's causing it real psychological distress. Sarah immediately stepped in. Don't push it, Sergeant. We can't cause harm to extract information, even if it would be valuable. The decision to prioritize Tank's well-being over intelligence gathering was one that would be debated in military circles for years to come, but in that moment, it felt like the only ethical choice. Santos projected soothing thoughts, trying to communicate that no information was required, that they had helped Tank simply because it needed help. Incomprehensible kindness. Soft species behavior outside all known parameters. Gratitude debt immense. Confusion, but also comfort. Asterisk over the following days, a routine developed. Santos would visit Tank several times a day, and their empathic connection grew stronger. Tank began to understand human emotions with increasing clarity, while Santos learned to interpret the alien's complex emotional landscape. Dr. Chun documented everything, building the first comprehensive psychological profile of a Kithran war beast. What they discovered challenged every assumption about the enemy. Tank wasn't a mindless weapon, but a highly intelligent being capable of complex emotions including love, loyalty, fear, and even humor. It had formed deep bonds with its Kithran handlers, despite the harsh treatment it received. It understood strategy and tactics, could make independent decisions in combat, and had even developed personal preferences about food, sleeping arrangements, and social interaction. This changes everything, Sarah told Colonel Harrison during her daily briefings. These aren't animals or biological machines. They're sentient beings, possibly as intelligent as humans, just with a different cognitive structure. Are you telling me we've been fighting against an army of enslaved soldiers? The colonel asked. More like willing partners who don't fully understand they have a choice, Sarah replied. Tank's loyalty to its handlers is genuine, but it's based on conditioning and limited exposure to alternatives. Now that it's experienced kindness without the threat of punishment, it's beginning to question its previous assumptions. The breakthrough came on Tank's 5th day of recovery. Santos was sitting beside its bed, reading reports while the alien rested, when she felt a gentle mental touch. Question: soft species as pack name for this one. Asterisk. Santos looked up, realizing Tank was asking if she had a name for it. Tank, she said aloud while projecting the mental image of strength and protection the name represented to her. Tank. Inadequate translation, but appropriate. This one enjoys designation. Question: this one may designate soft species with pack name. Asterisk. You want to give me a name? Observed behavior suggests designation. Gentle hunter. One who shows mercy to fallen enemies. Rare trait. Valuable trait. Asterisk. Santos felt herself tearing up at the unexpected honor. In Tank's mental framework, being designated as any kind of hunter was a mark of respect reserved for proven warriors. But a gentle hunter was something special, something Tank had never encountered before, but recognized as uniquely valuable. I would be honored to carry that name, she said formally. From that moment, their relationship shifted from doctor-patient to something approaching friendship. Tank began sharing more freely, not about military secrets, but about its personal experiences, its hopes, and, surprisingly, its dreams. Kithrin war beasts, it turned out, had complex inner lives that included aspirations beyond warfare. Tank dreamed of seeing the crystal forests of its homeworld in peacetime, without the pressure of patrol duties. It wanted to understand the music it had heard human soldiers playing, a concept entirely foreign to Kithrin culture. Most surprisingly, it expressed curiosity about human concepts of family and love, emotions that existed in Kithrin society, but were heavily regulated and restricted. Its species feels love, Santos reported during one briefing, but they're not allowed to express it freely. Everything is channeled toward military effectiveness. Tank has been conditioned to love its handlers, but it's never been allowed to love freely or to be loved for its own sake rather than its usefulness. Dr. Chun made a decision that would prove controversial, but ultimately crucial. I think we should show Tank some of our culture. Music, art, literature adapted for its sensory capabilities. Let it experience human creativity and emotional expression. To what end? Colonel Harrison asked. To give it a choice, Sarah replied. Right now, Tank only knows one way of life. If it's going to make any decisions about its future, it should understand all the possibilities. The cultural education program they developed was unprecedented. Tank was exposed to human music, which it found fascinating despite having no natural ability to produce similar sounds. It watched visual art with eyes that saw different spectrums of light, often pointing out beauty in patterns humans couldn't even perceive. Most impactfully, it was introduced to human literature and philosophy, concepts of individual choice and personal freedom that had no equivalent in Kithrin society. Tank's responses were profound. It began questioning not just its own situation, but the entire structure of the society that had created it. Why were choices made for it rather than by it? Why was its value tied solely to its combat effectiveness? Why had it never been asked what it wanted to do with its life? Gentle Hunter, asterisk, it communicated during one evening session, asterisk, this one experiences confusion distress about previous life understanding. If choice is possible, if kindness possible, then many questions arise about pack structure and life purpose. Asterisk, that's natural, Santos replied, projecting comfort. Growing and learning means questioning what you thought you knew. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Question: if this one chooses different path, abandons warrior purpose, what becomes of pack loyalty? What becomes of purpose meaning? Asterisk, you create your own purpose, Santos told it. Based on what you value, what brings you joy, what feels right to you. The concept was so foreign to Tank's experience that it took days to process. But gradually it began to understand. Choice wasn't betrayal, it was growth. Independence wasn't abandonment, it was self-determination. And that understanding would soon change everything, because unknown to the humans caring for Tank, their patient had just made a decision that would reshape the war itself. The emergency klaxon that woke forward operating base Darwin at 0347 hours had never sounded for anything quite like this before. In the Xenobiology medical bay, Tank had done something that no one had thought possible. It had activated a communication device that shouldn't have existed. Dr. Sarah Chun rushed into the medical bay, still pulling on her lab coat, to find Tank standing upright for the first time since its rescue. Its remaining 5 legs supported its massive frame steadily, and from somewhere within its armor plating came a rhythmic pulsing of blue light accompanied by a low harmonic tone. "What's happening?" Colonel Harrison demanded as he burst through the door behind her, followed by Sergeant Santos and half the base's command staff. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, her instruments showing readings she'd never seen before. Tank's neural activity has increased by 300%, and it's generating some kind of electromagnetic field. Santos approached slowly, trying to establish their empathic connection. What she found made her gasp. Tank's mind was no longer the confused, questioning consciousness she'd come to know. It was focused, determined, and somehow expanded. "General Hunter, this one must speak transmit to birth pack. Important message must be shared. Permission requested for communication protocol. Asterisk, it wants to contact its people," Santos announced to the room. "But it's asking permission first." "Absolutely not," Colonel Harrison said immediately. "We can't let it reveal our location or capabilities to enemy forces." "Gentle Hunter, meaning intention, not betrayal transmission. Important learning must be shared. Soft species kindness example must be broadcast. Change possibility exists." Asterisk Santos frowned, trying to understand the complex concepts Tank was projecting. "It's not trying to give away military secrets. It wants to tell its people about what it's learned here. About us. About the way we've treated it. That could still compromise our security," the colonel protested. Dr. Chin studied her readings more carefully. "Colonel, I don't think we have a choice. This communication system appears to be biological, integrated into Tank's physiology at a genetic level. It may not be able to stop the transmission even if it wanted to." As if responding to her words, Tank's harmonic tone shifted to a higher pitch, and the blue lights began pulsing faster. Somewhere in space, quantum entanglement principles that human science barely understood were connecting Tank to communication networks spanning the Kithrin Empire. "General Hunter, this one will not betray share location or tactical information. Only personal experience and philosophy learning will be transmitted. Trust requested." Asterisk Santos looked at Colonel Harrison. "Sir, it's asking us to trust it. After everything we've learned about its intelligence and emotional capacity, I think we should." "This is highly irregular," Harrison muttered, but he could see that the decision was already being made by forces beyond human control. "Monitor everything. If there's even a hint that it's compromising our security, we shut it down." Santos nodded and placed her hand on Tank's armored forehead, maintaining their empathic link. Through Tank's mind, she began to experience something unprecedented, a direct connection to the vast network of consciousness that linked Kithrin war beasts across the galaxy. What Tank transmitted to its people over the next hour would be analyzed by xenopsychologists for decades to come. It was part personal testimony, part philosophical treatise, and part revolutionary manifesto. Tank began by sharing its memories of the battlefield where it had been wounded and abandoned. But rather than focusing on the tactical details of the battle, it emphasized the emotional experience of being left behind, the resignation to death, the assumption that its usefulness had ended, and therefore its life had no further value. This one accepted abandonment fate as proper protocol. Asterisk Tank transmitted across the galactic network. Asterisk damaged asset disposal aligned with training understanding. Death alone was expected outcome. Asterisk the response from other Kithrin war beasts was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of minds connected to the network shared similar experiences, similar acceptances of their expendability. But Tank's transmission was just beginning. But soft species demonstrated different protocol. Humans showed kindness without purpose to wounded enemy. No tactical advantage gained. No information extracted. Only healing care provided. Asterisk the network buzzed with confusion. Such behavior didn't fit any known parameters for enemy species. Why would an enemy waste resources on a wounded foe? Tank shared its memories of Dr. Chen's gentle care, of Santos' daily visits, of Thompson's medical treatment provided with such care that Tank's pain was minimized even when humans gained nothing from doing so. It transmitted the emotional experience of being valued, not for what it could do, but simply for what it was, a living, thinking, feeling being. Humans demonstrate pack loyalty extending beyond pack boundaries. Asterisk Tank continued. Compassion response triggered by suffering recognition regardless of species origin. This one experienced value recognition as individual being rather than tool asset. Across the galaxy, Kithrin War beasts began sharing their own suppressed memories and feelings. Stories emerged of handlers who had shown brief moments of kindness before catching themselves and returning to proper emotional distance. Memories surfaced of companions lost to battles where retreat protocols demanded abandoning the wounded. For the first time, these experiences were being examined not as necessary sacrifices, but as potential tragedies. But Tank's most revolutionary transmission was yet to come. It began sharing what it had learned about human concepts of choice, individual autonomy, and self-determination. Humans possess concept, personal choice. Individual beings select purpose path based on internal preference rather than assignment protocol. This one learned possibility, warrior purpose optional, not mandatory. Life value exists independent of combat utility. The effect was immediate and profound. Kithrin War beast communication networks had never carried such concepts before. The idea that they might have choices about their lives, that they might pursue purposes other than warfare, that their value as individuals might exist independently of their usefulness to their handlers, was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Santos felt the network's response through Tank's connection, a wave of excitement, confusion, hope, and fear that threatened to overwhelm her human consciousness. She gripped Tank's armor tighter, trying to stay grounded as thousands of alien minds grappled with revolutionary new possibilities. Questions multiply. Came responses from across the galaxy. If choice possibility exists, what becomes of loyalty bonds? If individual value independent of service utility, what justifies current existence parameters? If kindness possible between species, what truth value in enemy designation? Tank had opened a door that could never be closed. The questions it had raised would spread through every Kithrin War beast in the galaxy, and from there potentially to their handlers and the broader Kithrin society. But the transmission was creating effects closer to home as well. Dr. Chin's instruments detected similar harmonic frequencies beginning to emerge from other directions. "Colonel," she said urgently, "I'm picking up response signals. Multiple sources getting stronger." Colonel Harrison checked with his communications staff. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Torres, "we're detecting incoming ships. Multiple contacts, Kithrin configuration, but they're not following standard attack patterns. They're approaching slowly, almost cautiously." Tank's transmission was drawing responses. Other Kithrin War beasts were convincing their handlers to investigate this unprecedented communication, to see for themselves what had prompted such revolutionary thoughts from one of their most elite units. "General Hunter," Tank's mental voice carried new urgency. Birth pack response. Investigation party approaches. This one requests permission to continue communication with approach party. Demonstration opportunity exists for kindness examples. Santos realized what Tank was asking. "Colonel, it wants to serve as an intermediary when the other Kithrins arrive. It wants to show them what it's experienced here. That's assuming they come in peace," Harrison replied grimly. "For all we know, they're coming to retrieve their war beast and destroy the base that corrupted it." Negative assessment. General Hunter, Tank projected confidently. Communication network shows curiosity motivation, not aggression intent. Birth pack desires understanding verification of impossibility claims. Peaceful approach probable if reciprocal peace demonstrated. Dr. Chen looked up from her instruments. "Colonel, Tank's neurochemistry suggests it's telling the truth as it understands it. Its stress indicators are low, and it's projecting confidence about the incoming ship's intentions." Santos felt Tank's absolute certainty through their link. The alien was staking not just its own life, but potentially the lives of everyone on the base on its belief that its people would approach with curiosity rather than hostility. "Sir," she said formally, "I recommend we trust Tank's assessment. What we've learned about Kithrin psychology suggests they value investigation and understanding. Tank has given them something completely unprecedented to investigate." Colonel Harrison faced perhaps the most crucial decision of his career. Trust in alien war beast assessment of its own people's intentions, potentially saving thousands of lives if peaceful contact could be established, or prepare for battle against forces that might only be seeking understanding. "All right," he decided, "but we stay at ready alert. One sign of hostility, and we defend ourselves. Sergeant Santos, stay connected to tank. If it senses any deception or danger from the approaching ships, I want to know immediately. As the Kithran ships approached forward operating base Darwin, tank continued its transmission, now serving as a real-time ambassador between two species that had been trying to kill each other for 8 months. The war beast that had been left for dead on a battlefield was about to become the bridge between civilizations. And, thousands of light years away, similar scenes were beginning to play out as other Kithran war beasts, inspired by Tank's testimony, began questioning their handlers about human concepts of mercy, choice, and individual worth. Tank's message had done more than save its own life. It had planted the seeds of the first genuine peace negotiations this galaxy had seen in generations. The real test would come in the next few hours, as those seeds either took root or were destroyed by the fears and prejudices of species who had known only war. The 3 Kithran vessels that descended from the cloud-wreathed sky of Kepler 442c were unlike anything the humans had seen before. Where their warships were angular and aggressive, these craft were organic in appearance, their hulls seeming to ripple and flow like living tissue. They settled onto the ground outside forward operating base Darwin's perimeter with surprising gentleness, their landing creating barely a whisper of displaced air. Colonel Harrison watched from the command center as the ships powered down, his hand hovering near the alert button that would bring every weapon system in the base online. "Any sign of weapons deployment?" he asked his tactical officer. "Negative, sir. If those ships are armed, they're not showing it. Scans indicate they're primarily transport and communication vessels, not warships." In the medical bay, Tank's harmonic transmission had reached a crescendo of activity. The alien's entire body was now pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that Dr. Chen's instruments couldn't fully catalog. But through her empathic link, Sergeant Santos could feel Tank's emotional state. Nervous excitement mixed with profound hope. "Gentle Hunter." Tank's mental voice carried undertones Santos had never experienced before. Birth Pack representative's approach. 3-ship formation indicates high-priority diplomatic mission. Senior handlers and battle companion units aboard. This one requests presence at meeting encounter. It wants to be there when we meet with its people, Santos reported. This isn't just a rescue mission for them. It's a formal diplomatic contact. Dr. Chun checked Tank's mobility readings. Its leg amputation site has healed enough for limited movement. With support, it could manage a short journey. Colonel Harrison made a decision that would be remembered in history texts. All right, if they're here for diplomacy, let's give them the full diplomatic treatment. Sergeant Santos, you'll accompany Tank to the meeting. Dr. Chun, I want you there too as our xenobiology expert. Full honor guard but weapons lowered. As the human delegation prepared to meet their former enemies, the Kithran ships began discharging their passengers. What emerged were beings that challenged every assumption humanity had made about their foes. The Kithrans themselves were tall, graceful creatures with the same bioluminescent armor, plating as Tank, but configured for bipedal locomotion. Their movements were fluid and precise, speaking of both physical capability and mental discipline. But what struck the humans most was how they interacted with their war beasts. Rather than the harsh, utilitarian relationship the intelligence reports had suggested, the humans witnessed what could only be described as partnerships. The Kithran handlers moved in perfect synchronization with their war beast companions, their bioluminescent patterns creating complex light displays that seemed to represent ongoing conversation. When one war beast stumbled slightly on the uneven ground, its handler immediately provided physical and what appeared to be emotional support. "They're not masters and weapons," Dr. Chun whispered to Santos as they watched from the observation deck. "They're teams, partners, maybe even friends." Tank's excitement was palpable as it recognized specific individuals among the approaching delegation. Battle companion Vrex approaches. Longtime packmate. Also senior handler Korth 9. Respected leader who selected this one for elite service. Meeting nervous, but anticipation high. The formal meeting took place in the base's main conference room, hastily reconfigured to accommodate beings of Tank's size. The atmosphere was tense, but not hostile, with both humans and Kithrans clearly uncertain about protocols for this unprecedented situation. The lead Kithran, whom Tank identified as Senior Handler Korth 9, was a being of obvious authority and intelligence. Its armor plating bore intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as it moved, and its eyes held a depth of understanding that immediately commanded respect. When Korth 9 spoke, its voice was a harmonic blend of tones that human ears found strangely melodious. But the real communication happened when Tank limped forward and touched its forehead to that of its former handler. The light display that followed was breathtaking. Both beings' armor plating erupted in synchronized patterns of blues, purples, and gold, creating a conversation in bioluminescence that was part language, part emotional expression, and part art form. Santos, maintaining her empathic link with Tank, found herself experiencing fragments of the exchange. Tank was sharing everything. Its memories of being wounded and abandoned, its confusion and pain, the first moment when Santos had shown a kindness, the gradual awakening to new possibilities that had followed. But more than that, it was sharing its feelings about those experiences, the way kindness had transformed its understanding of existence itself. Korth 9's responses were complex, mixing what Santos interpreted as concern, curiosity, and something that might have been guilt. The senior handler was grappling with concepts that had no place in traditional Kithran thinking, trying to understand how one of its most valued companions had been so fundamentally changed by enemy contact. Dr. Chun, taking careful notes, whispered to Colonel Harrison, "This is extraordinary. They're not just exchanging information, they're sharing emotional experiences directly. Tank is literally showing its handler what it felt like to be cared for by us." The light display gradually faded, and Korth 9 turned its attention to the humans. When it spoke, Tank served as both translator and advocate. Senior handler Korth 9 expresses confusion curiosity about soft species motivations. Tank communicated to Santos. Standard protocol understanding suggests resource expenditure on enemy wounded indicates intelligence extraction intent or psychological warfare purpose. Requests explanation for kindness without obvious benefit. Santos found herself in the surreal position of serving as humanity's spokesperson in what might be the galaxy's first interspecies peace negotiation. "Please tell Senior Handler Korth 9 that we helped Tank because it was suffering," she said aloud while projecting the emotional reasoning behind her words. In human culture, unnecessary suffering is considered wrong regardless of who experiences it. We have a saying, "Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself." We would want someone to help us if we were wounded and dying. The translation process was fascinating to observe. Tank's armor plating flickered as it converted human concepts into Kithran understanding, while also projecting the emotional authenticity behind Santos' words. Korth 9's patterns shifted to what Tank indicated was surprise and deep contemplation. Senior handler requires clarification understanding. Soft species demonstrates empathy response across species barriers. Ethical framework extends beyond pack boundaries. Yes, Santos replied. We believe that sentient beings have inherent value and deserve compassion regardless of their species or their relationship to us. What followed was perhaps the most important philosophical discussion in galactic history. Through Tank's translation, Korth 9 began sharing Kithran ethical frameworks, their concepts of duty, honor, and pack loyalty. The humans learned that Kithran society wasn't inherently cruel, but had developed under pressures that prioritized survival and efficiency above individual welfare. The war beasts, they learned, weren't slaves but partners in the truest sense. They were bred for intelligence and combat capability, but also for loyalty and emotional bonding with their handlers. The harsh treatment that humans had observed wasn't cruelty, but conditioning designed to prepare them for the brutal realities of war. But what Tank experienced with us suggests there might be other possibilities, Dr. Chen observed. Ways of relating that don't require such harsh preparation. Korth 9's response was illuminating. Through Tank, it explained that Kithran society had been at war for so long that they had forgotten there might be alternatives to military efficiency. The concept of choosing kindness over tactical advantage was genuinely alien to them. Not because they lacked the capacity for kindness, but because they had never considered it a viable option. Senior handler requests demonstration proof of soft species' peaceful intentions. Tank translated. If kindness philosophy genuine, would soft species consider cessation of hostilities for mutual benefit investigation? Colonel Harrison leaned forward. Are they proposing a ceasefire? More complex concept, Asterisk Tank replied. Asterisk Senior Handler suggests establishment of neutral territory for continued learning exchange. Some War Beast units request opportunity to experience kindness examples directly. Curiosity motivation high among companion units who received transmission communication. Asterisk Santos felt her heart racing as she realized the implications. They want to set up a place where both species can interact peacefully, where more Kithran War Beasts can experience what Tank has experienced. The negotiations that followed were delicate and complex. Both sides had to overcome months of conditioning that labeled the other as enemy. But Tank's presence made all the difference, serving as living proof that mutual understanding was possible. The agreement they reached was limited but revolutionary. A temporary ceasefire in the immediate sector, the establishment of a neutral meeting station, and the exchange of small delegations for cultural and philosophical study. Most importantly, any Kithran War Beast that wished to experience human compassion would be permitted to do so. Korth 9 made one final request through Tank. Asterisk Senior Handler desires understanding of designation process. How do soft species choose which companion units to assist? What criteria determine worthiness for kindness? Asterisk Santos smiled as she answered, "We don't choose. Any being that needs help deserves to receive it. That's what makes kindness powerful. It's not limited or conditional. It's universal." The concept was so foreign to Kithran thinking that it took several minutes of bioluminescent conversation for Tank to adequately translate it. But when understanding finally dawned, Korth 9's armor plating erupted in patterns that Tank identified as wonder and hope. As the meeting concluded and preparations began for the historic establishment of neutral territory, Santos realized that Tank's rescue had become something far greater than anyone had imagined. What had started as a simple act of compassion for a wounded animal had become the foundation for the first real peace this galaxy had known in generations. But the hardest part was still to come. Tank would have to choose between returning with its people or staying with the humans who had shown it a different way of life. And that choice would determine whether this fragile peace could survive its first real test. The neutral station established in the asteroid belt between human and Kithran territories was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Built jointly by both species in a remarkable display of cooperation, it combined human engineering efficiency with Kithran organic architecture, creating a structure that was both functional and beautiful. 6 months had passed since the first diplomatic contact, and the station had become a hub of cultural exchange that was reshaping both civilizations. But today, it would serve as the stage for the most important decision in Tank's life. Sergeant Maria Santos, now bearing the official title of Interspecies Liaison Officer, stood in the station's observation deck watching ships from both fleets arrive for the ceremony. What had started as a simple rescue mission had evolved into something that would be studied by historians for millennia. The first successful, peaceful integration between species that had been locked in mortal combat. "Nervous?" Dr. Sarah Chun asked, joining Santos at the viewport. Chun had become the head of the new Xenocultural Exchange program, documenting and facilitating the ongoing cultural exchange between humans and Kithrans. Terrified, Santos admitted. Tank has to choose between two completely different ways of life, and either choice will affect the future of this peace process. The choice had become necessary because of Tank's unique position. Over the past 6 months, it had become the primary translator and cultural ambassador between the species, but maintaining that role required a formal decision about its citizenship and allegiance. Both species wanted Tank to remain with them, but for very different reasons. The Kithrans valued Tank as a bridge between their traditional ways and new possibilities. Senior Handler Korth 9 had explained that Tank's experiences had already influenced fundamental changes in how war beasts were treated throughout the Empire. The harsh conditioning protocols were being re-examined, with many units now incorporating rest periods, recreational activities, and emotional support that had previously been considered weaknesses. The humans wanted Tank to stay because it had become family. The staff at Forward Operating Base Darwin, now converted to a diplomatic facility, had grown deeply attached to the alien who had challenged their preconceptions about their former enemies. Tank had learned to appreciate human music, had developed preferences for different foods, and had even started what could only be called friendships with several human personnel. But the choice was Tank's alone to make. In the station's main amphitheater, Representatives from both species gathered for the formal ceremony. Tank stood at the center, its armor plating displaying the complex patterns that had become its signature, a unique blend of traditional Kithran ceremonial designs and new motifs inspired by human art. Jittal Hunter. Tank's mental voice reached Santos across the crowded room. This one experiences profound gratitude debt to both peoples. Choice difficulty exceeds all previous decision challenges. Santos felt Tank's conflicted emotions through their empathic link. The alien loved its original people, respected their traditions, and understood their ways in a manner no human ever could. But it had also experienced possibilities with humanity that had fundamentally changed its understanding of what life could be. Senior Handler Korth 9 stepped forward, its bioluminescent patterns creating a formal address display. Tank translated for the assembled humans. Senior Handler speaks of pride in companion unit's achievements. Expresses desire for Tank's return to Birth Pack for continuation of bridge building between species. Offers position of High Cultural Advisor. Unprecedented honor for War Beast Unit. The offer was extraordinary. Kithran society had never before created such a position, especially for what they had traditionally considered a support unit. It represented a fundamental shift in their social structure, one directly inspired by Tank's experiences. Colonel Harrison, now serving as the human ambassador to the neutral zone, stepped forward to make humanity's offer. Tank has become more than an ally to us. It has become a teacher, a friend, and a member of our community. We offer Tank full citizenship in human space, with all the rights and protections that entails, including the right to pursue whatever path brings it happiness. The human offer was equally unprecedented. No non-human being had ever been granted full citizenship in human space, and the legal and philosophical implications were staggering. But it represented humanity's commitment to the principle that had started this entire process, treating beings with kindness and respect regardless of their origin. Tank's response surprised everyone. Instead of choosing between the offers, Tank began a bioluminescent display unlike anything either species had seen before. The patterns were complex beyond translation, incorporating elements of both Kithran formal communication and symbolic representations it had learned from human art and literature. When the display ended, Tank spoke directly to both groups simultaneously, using its empathic abilities to project meaning to the assembled Kithrans while speaking aloud for the humans. This one has learned much from both peoples. From Birth Pack, learned loyalty, honor, strength of purpose. From Human Pack, learned kindness, choice, value of individual joy. But greatest learning is this. Choice between families is false choice. Bridge being cannot abandon either side of bridge. Dr. Chen leaned forward, fascinated by Tank's solution. What are you proposing? This one requests creation of new position, permanent ambassador to both peoples. We'll spend time cycles with each species, carrying lessons between them. We'll help other war beasts experience kindness choice. We'll help humans understand honor strength of Kithran ways. Bridge being must remain bridge. The solution was elegant in its simplicity and revolutionary in its implications. Tank was proposing to become something new, a truly interspecies citizen, belonging fully to both cultures while serving as a permanent link between them. Korth 9's bioluminescent response was immediate and enthusiastic. The senior handler saw the wisdom in Tank's proposal, recognizing that their most valuable cultural ambassador would be most effective moving between both worlds rather than being confined to one. Colonel Harrison's response was equally positive. The position Tank describes doesn't exist in our current diplomatic framework, but we can create it. A permanent cultural exchange ambassador with full rights and protections in both territories. But Tank wasn't finished. Its next announcement would reshape the entire peace process. This one also requests permission to establish training program for other bridge beings. Many war beasts express curiosity about kindness experience. Many humans express interest in honor strength learning. Formal exchange program could create understanding network spanning both species. Santos felt tears in her eyes as she realized what Tank was proposing. Not just personal integration between the species, but a systematic program to create cultural understanding on a scale that could make the peace permanent. Dr. Chan was already taking notes, her scientific mind racing with possibilities. A formal exchange program between war beast units and human cultural teams. We could study empathic communication, learn their concepts of honor and duty, while they experience our approaches to individual choice and emotional expression. The ceremony concluded with the formal establishment of what would become known as the Tank Protocol, the framework for interspecies cultural exchange that would serve as a model for peaceful integration throughout the galaxy. Tank became the first being in galactic history to hold dual citizenship across species lines, a position that would be studied, debated, and eventually emulated by other species seeking peaceful coexistence. 3 years later, Sergeant Santos, now Director of Interspecies Cultural Programs, stood on the observation deck of the greatly expanded neutral station watching the latest group of exchange participants arrive. 12 Kithran Warbeast units were preparing to spend 6 months learning about human concepts of art, music, and individual choice, while an equal number of human volunteers would embed with Kithran military units to study their concepts of honor, duty, and collective purpose. Tank approached, moving with the easy confidence it had developed over years of navigating between two worlds. Its armor plating displayed patterns that had become its signature, complex designs that incorporated elements from both cultures, creating something entirely new and beautiful. Gentle Hunter, Asterisk Tank's mental voice carried deep satisfaction. Asterisk Exchange Program shows remarkable success indicators. Warbeast units who experience kindness training show decreased aggression responses and increased problem-solving capabilities. Human participants develop enhanced courage responses and stronger loyalty bonds. Asterisk, you're creating a new kind of warrior, Santos observed. One that's strong enough to fight when necessary, but wise enough to choose peace when possible. Correction, Gentle Hunter. We create beings capable of choice. Whether they choose warrior path or peace path becomes individual decision based on circumstances and personal values. Asterisk Santos smiled at the distinction. Even after all this time, Tank continued to teach her new ways of thinking about choice, duty, and the relationship between strength and compassion. The success of the Tank Protocol had spread far beyond the original human-Kithran conflict. The Zolonian Collective and the Threxian Republic had both requested similar programs, and preliminary negotiations were underway with 6 other species who had heard about the unprecedented peace between former enemies. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in the Warbeast units themselves. No longer considered expendable assets, they had become valued partners and advisors. Their enhanced empathic abilities, combined with training in human concepts of individual worth, had created a generation of beings uniquely qualified to serve as bridges between different ways of thinking. Tank had kept its promise to the dying war beast it had once been. No more war animals would be left to die alone on battlefields. But more than that, Tank had proven that kindness wasn't weakness, that compassion could coexist with strength, and that the simple act of caring for a wounded enemy could change the course of galactic history. As Santos watched the newest group of participants begin their cultural exchange, she reflected on how a simple decision to help a suffering creature had grown into something that was reshaping civilization itself. The war beast that had been left for dead had become the foundation for a new kind of peace, one built not on treaties or territorial agreements, but on mutual understanding and shared compassion. Gentle Hunter, Asterisk Tank's mental voice interrupted her thoughts, carrying the warm humor she had come to love. Asterisk, this one observes contemplation patterns in your behavior. Sharing requests for thought content. Asterisk, just thinking about how far we've all come, Santos replied. 3 years ago, you were dying on a battlefield. Now you're reshaping the galaxy. Correction required, Gentle Hunter. This one was rescued by beings who chose kindness over convenience. Reshaping outcome resulted from choice decision of soft species to value life over military advantage. Tank merely served as communication bridge for pre-existing kindness potential. Asterisk Santos laughed, recognizing Tank's characteristic humility. The alien refused to take credit for changes it had directly inspired, always attributing success to the choices others had made to embrace compassion over conflict. But as she watched the next generation of bridge builders begin their training, Santos knew the truth. Tank hadn't just been saved by human kindness. It had amplified that kindness and reflected it back into the galaxy, creating a chain reaction of compassion that was still spreading. The war beast that had been left for dead had become something unprecedented, proof that mercy could be stronger than warfare, that understanding could triumph over hatred, and that sometimes the most profound victories came not from defeating your enemies, but from turning them into friends. In the years that followed, historians would debate the exact factors that led to the Great Peace of the Neutral Zone. They would analyze diplomatic protocols, study cultural exchange methodologies, and create detailed timelines of political negotiations. But those who had been there from the beginning knew the truth was simpler and more profound. Peace began the moment a human soldier looked into the eyes of a wounded enemy and chose to help rather than walk away. Everything else was just the galaxy catching up to that single act of revolutionary kindness.